All right. Welcome to the 2025 Global Peace Film Festival Filmmaker Conversations. I'm Gabby Kennedy, the host of the Actors Talk with Gabby Kennedy. Co hosting these conversations with me is Nina Strike, founder and festival director of Global Peace Film Festival. Now, this year's festival runs from September 16th through the 21st in Winter Park in Orlando. And the festival's Free for All Shorts run program runs September 22nd through the 28th. For more information about the film, go to peacefilmfest.org. Now, today, we have the wonderful pleasure of being joined by Jon Osaki, director of Making Waves, The Rise of Asian America. Jon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, will you please tell us about your film?
Sure. So, Making Waves, The Rise of Asian America is about both the movement that created ethnic studies in this country back in the 1960s, as well as contemporary efforts to expand ethnic studies content in not just post-secondary institutions, but in K through 12 schools across the country.
Nice.
So John, first of all, it's great to see you. This is going to be the third film of yours we've had in the festival.
I think fourth, actually.
Fourth, yes, and interestingly, this film is much more expansive than your previous films. It covers the whole country, um, and well, multiple states. So tell us what prompted this film um, and how you managed to really expand the horizons of your work.
Sure. So this project started in 2021. And, interestingly enough, I was approached by the faculty at UC Berkeley, who, of course, when you come and see the film, you will see that they have one of the legacy ethnic studies programs in the country. But to my surprise and to the shock of many, we found that their ethnic studies programs were under siege and were being decimated. And it's part of this evolution and kind of ebbs and flows of these programs where, at times they are not considered a priority of college administrations. I was working with them on a short piece to address their issue, but while I was working on that, it became very clear that something was happening across the country. And what clear to me is, of course, this is coming in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder and the amplification of racial justice issues in this country. And what was very clear to me was this wave of backlash that was taking place, right? And it was starting to manifest itself in book bans, in attacks on diversity, education, equity, and inclusion. And so anything that involved the race was suddenly becoming under attack. And of course, we saw what happened with the affirmative action cases. And so it just became very clear to me that there was a much larger story here than just what was happening at UC Berkeley. And then simultaneous to that, that was very inspiring to me was these, most people think of Asian American communities being on the coast, but it was very clear to me that there were these emerging Asian American communities all across the country. And many of them were reeling from this wave of anti-Asian hate in this country, right? That was prompted by the focus on China as being the cause of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so what many of these communities were doing was they were really lifting up, Asian American history, stories, and the contributions that, Asian Americans have made to this country as a way to educate people right? Make them more aware that
Mhm.
Asian Americans aren't, although some think of us as foreigners and can't make the distinction between Asian Americans and Asians from Asian countries, but that we've had this long history of not only contributions, but being impacted by systemic racism in this country. And so that's really the story we wanted to tell.
Mm.
Yeah, and so did you do all the shooting? Did you travel to all the different places? Because you meet with fascinating up and coming leaders.
So fortunately not. I had a wonderful co-director named Josh Chuck in this project, and so he traveled to many of the locations. I went to some, and then in some cases, we just hired crews in those areas to
Mhm.
do the shooting for us. So it was really a interesting project in that some of it was completely remote because we were still coming out of the pandemic, and it was sometimes hard to get people to gather, and then in some cases, because all of my projects are generously described as micro budget films, in that the budget was so small you could barely see it. So we had to really be creative in how we reached out to these different communities, but what we found were just these fantastic stories, that every community had its own story about Asian Americans, fighting for self-determination and fighting for representation, and to try to make sure that those in the surrounding communities understood our stories. And so it's just really fascinating how each individual community had their own unique pathway to bringing these stories forward, to creating these programs. And so it was just really wonderful how, in fact, we ended up having so much footage that we had to hire. I don't usually do this. I usually do all the editing myself, but we had to hire a professional editor because we just had so much content that we had to figure out how to bring together in a cohesive way.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you can really, it's really fascinating because because there are so many different uh, communities represented in the film, and what's really impressive is the young people that you were able to find, or that your crews were able to find and focus on. Um, so, in terms of the process and in terms of finding the stories within the large amount of footage that you had, what did you learn in doing this film?
Well, so I always like to say, so just, putting on my other hat. So I've been running a community-based nonprofit in San Francisco for almost 3 decades now. And our organization was started by students who were part of the original Third World Liberation Front. And so that's really kind of our origins as an organization. And so I take great pride in so I run a child and youth development nonprofit. And I take great pride in being able to share with people that our organization was started and founded by students. And I think what we were extremely inspired and delighted to be able to do with this film is show that the power, the activism of young people is still very alive and well, and that in many communities they are actually leading these movements, right, to amplify Asian American stories in their communities. And I think we found some just really special young people, some of whom, they have no training, they have no very few resources, but they just have the will, right, to lift up and make sure that Asian America is part of the larger American narrative. And I think they've very much felt that as young people growing up through the pandemic, they very much felt like at times they were not really part of this country's story. And so being able to show them in their element, lifting up these stories, speaking out, organizing is just something that we're really, really delighted to be able to bring to audiences.
Knowing your background and that, that you work with that nonprofit in the Bay Area, I figured that was where the focus on the young people who really are special and really, you know, make you proud about what they're doing. I figured that was the case. What surprised you in the making of the film?
Well, I think what surprised me was, I talked about this a little bit earlier, was just really the uniqueness of every community story, but also how much we have in common, right? And
Mhm.
also how much it's tied to other communities of color and their efforts for self-determination and representation and trying to make sure that people understand their stories, that so much of it is intertwined. And it became very clear to me working on this film that what was so powerful about that initial movement that created ethnic studies is it wasn't one community advocating for themselves. It was, Asian Americans and the Black community students and the Latinx students and Native American students and white working class students fighting for each other. And I think that, to me, is one of the most powerful lessons of the original movement that created ethnic studies, and something that we have to think about: how do we maintain those relationships and opportunities to advocate for and with each other? And I think
Mhm.
that's one of the most powerful lessons from this film. And I was just also really surprised at being able to, you know, the fact that there were so many powerful stories that we ran into on our very limited time working on this project, and that there are so many more all across the country. Right? I get asked all the time when I go screen this film at a community that isn't highlighted in the film. I always get asked, "Well, why didn't you include us?" And it was because there were so many
Yeah.
stories to include. There were so many fantastic efforts, right, to lift up, ethnic studies content in these different communities. And so it was not easy to decide which ones to include. And of course, our budget also had limitations in terms of where we can go and shoot. But I think that what we tried to do was include kind of a breadth of different regions of the country so that people get an idea that these things are happening all over.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to do anything with the stories that you couldn't include, and with the amount of footage that you had, that you have? Are you able to um, do anything with an archive or with anything so that some more of these stories can be shared?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Actually, a lot of it is already cut. We just couldn't get it into the final film. And so I definitely think we hope to share a lot of this because it really is, great content. It just didn't quite fit into the flow of our film. But, definitely we hope to share it more broadly, especially with the communities that they're from which the interviewers came from or interviewees came from.
And before I turn it back to Gabby, I just want you to talk a little bit about your previous work and the other work that we've shared and where people can find it.
Sure. So again, I'm just so, grateful to be connected to your community. I think you've screened all of my films, and there's not many festivals that have done that. And they all have a very common thread in that they're all focused around social justice, lifting up and amplifying issues that, the public, it's become very clear to me that with respect to American history, we not only have to teach it, we have to reteach it,
Mm.
right? We have to re-educate communities because it's so easy to forget, right? Or to only know bits and pieces of important issues. And so I think, the fact that you've been willing to screen some of my films really means a lot and lets me know how aligned we are in terms of the types of issues that we care about. And all of my films, my website for all of my films is jjmlproductions.com. But all of my films can be seen on Canopy. I'm also a member of the Co-op New Day Films, and all of them are available for educational distribution through that platform.
Nice. Nice. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to you talk about making waves, the rise of Asian America. A question that I had for you, Jon, is can you share with us? You talked a lot about those powerful stories. Now, we don't want to give anything away, but can you share one of those stories with us from your film?
Absolutely. So I think one of the most compelling storylines for every audience that gets to see this film is a young student who is in middle school in Austin, Texas, who is, I think when you see the film, everybody is just amazed to see somebody that young, so well spoken, so involved in activism and working on issues that he cares about. And we were very, pleased to be able to premiere this film in Austin. And so we got a chance to spend time with the whole Texas crew. And, it's just amazing to be able to spend time with Ayan Moladina, who's the young person I'm referring to. And he shared something with me that all of us were just amazed by. He's obviously a very special young person, but a little, I don't want to say odd, but it's unique. He shared with us that on his free time, he goes up to the Texas state capitol and he just hangs out with the legislators. And what was really interesting was that he said, I don't spend a lot of time with the legislators who agree with me, right? Who are aligned on the issues that I care about. I spend time with those who disagree with me. And they have a great relationship. They all say hi, they all say hi to him when they see him, and they have conversations. And to me, it just speaks to how important it is to have conversations and build relationships with people who don't agree with us, right? And I think that having it be a young person really model the type of behavior that I think would be far more productive in this country than a lot of what we see today. It just really speaks to, I think, hope for the future and hope for what I believe this country can and should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a really great story and really inspiring. That young person has a bright future ahead of him for sure.
He does.
For sure. Well, Jon, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we go, you mentioned your nonprofit organization. Where can we connect with you and find out more information about your nonprofit?
So sure. So the organization I work for, it's called JCYC, and you can find us at jcyc.org. I'll just say really quickly. So the JCYC stands for Japanese Community Youth Council, but we're a little bit of an anomaly in that we're based in San Francisco, Japantown. We're created by the organization, but we believe and are adamant in serving everybody, right? And so we're still very much connected to the values of the Third World Liberation Front, in that we don't just take care of our community, we take care of others. And so we're very grateful to be able to serve thousands of Latinx students, hundreds of Black students, hundreds of Asian American students from every Asian ethnic background in San Francisco. And that's just what we believe in, and are very fortunate that we've been, we are in our 55th year of operation.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing that. Organizations like that are the change that we want. We're becoming the change that we want to see. So that's wonderful. So thank you so much, Jon, for having this discussion with us today. Again, the 2025 Global Peace Film Festival runs from September 16th through the 21st in Orlando and Winter Park, Florida. Jon, will you be joining us there?
I will be there, and I'm looking forward to
Wonderful.
meeting folks.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you there. Thank you again so much for being with us today. Thank you so much, Nina, for this wonderful conversation. We'll see you at Global Peace Film Festival. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.